Well, I'm going to introduce our moderator, which is Brent Trethewey. I'm sorry, I said your last name wrong.
You had it right the first time.
I know, Trethewey.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. For some reason, when I look at your name, I think of it as Trethewey. I don't know why.
But most people either know it cold or totally botch it.
Well, it's Trethewey.
Trethewey, that's right.
And it's Licata Risk Advisors Brent is with, and he will be our moderator this morning. And Brent, if you want to have all the speakers introduce themselves, that would be great.
Well, thank you, everybody. Rick, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you to the New England and New York Real Estate Journal. If you don't get the journal, you have to subscribe. Tremendous publication. It's a great resource for content, for anything going on in commercial real estate. Not only are they a publisher, they also do these great events for networking and content. So thank you, Rick. Thank you to all of you, the audience, for joining us today, and a special thank you to the panel. In a moment, I'm going to have you all reintroduce yourselves. But I just want to kind of, kick this off. I was actually on a town hall meeting with the Mass Bio, the Mass Bio Tech Council. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. You should definitely look into that. My friend is Bob Kaplan. He's the outgoing CEO. And if this doesn't tell you what's going on, then nothing will. Bob is leaving his position at Mass Bio as the CEO, and he's taking a new position at JLL to help with construction and development of life science, which is exactly what we're talking about today. They were talking about the number of early stage companies and the fact that life science is really on the forefront now. I mean, look at what's happening with the pandemic and Moderna's role. Moderna is right next to Mass Bio Council and right in Cambridge. So, we are right in the epicenter of the life science movement. So a very relevant topic today and very exciting times, even in the face of a pandemic. So I'd like to have the panel quickly reintroduce themselves. We'll start with Raffe, if you could just give your name and your title and your company and what your role is.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Raffe Khazadian, Principal Architect, Director of Life Science with CI Design. I also want to say I see a lot of familiar faces and names on the call, so thank you all for joining. Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Raffe. And Jim?
Good morning, everyone. Jim Alibrandi, owner and president of Interstate Electrical Services Corp. Feel honored to have everybody with us this morning. Figured your options are this webinar or our country's inauguration. So it's a privilege to have you all with us today. Thank you for being part of it this morning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. And Nick.
Good morning, everybody. Nick Cassaro, Structure Tone. I lead the life science group here and support projects as they develop from early stage companies to larger multinationals.
Great, and thank you again for your time, everyone on the panel. A great group of professionals. So we're going to get right into the questions here. We're going to start with Raffe. Raffe, with office space seeing large vacancies, is there a call to repurpose that type of space to fit the life science need?
Yeah, absolutely. More so than ever. We're actually seeing this past year there's a tremendous amount of influx from landlords, developers, and building owners who have reached out to us and obviously to the rest of the industry looking to convert their existing office space into what can be considered life science or laboratory space. These are buildings that were built for the purpose of office inhabitants for business use that now are being converted or looked at being converted for the life science industry. A lot of things that are looked at in this type of scenario, from utility infrastructure, base building upgrades. What does the building have coming in for gas, power, and electric, sewer? Does the building structure have enough capacity to support additional floor loading? We typically put a lot of infrastructure on the roofs of these buildings to support the laboratories. So we are seeing and studying, excuse me, not only are we in the process of converting buildings right now into life science buildings, but we're doing a bunch of studies to see if it's even feasible. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. Nick, I'm sure, and Jim, I'm sure you're seeing very similar things.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, Raffe. To turn over on the vacant office space these days into the life sciences, and as you mentioned, it's that initial feasibility study that's so critical and important, whether or not an existing site is the right thing for a change. If you look at some of these buildings that go back into the 80s and actually even into the early 90s. When we look at what they were built and designed for on the electrical side, we could have been looking at electrical loads of, the 10 to 20 watts per square foot. And now with some of the requirements of life safety world, we're looking at, 30 plus watts per square foot. So the infrastructure is absolutely one of the key components to the conversion of these spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing, Raffe and Jim, to both of your points, I think uniquely in 2020 or 2021, we're seeing the technology demand, the technology getting smaller, but the demand by utility getting larger. So even they may fit physically in terms of size in an office space or in the superstructure of an office space, it's the power and gas and all those utilities that need to be kind of built around them seems to be the trick nowadays, not the size and quantity of, how to get certain pieces of equipment in, which was the trick back in a few years ago.
Yeah, and in addition, a lot of this goes somewhat overlooked initially when you're looking at real estate and you're making big real estate decisions, but just getting into the details and understanding what the floor to floor heights are, and understanding that serving laboratory air is different than serving office air, with 100% air being used for the laboratory spaces. So understanding if you have the infrastructure and the floor to floor heights, especially to the bottom of the steel to distribute new ductwork, that's a big first step in evaluating and understanding if the building does have good bones for conversion.
Well, obviously, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's so attractive about the existing real estate, though, is the race to market, right? Versus building new coming out of the ground. When you take into consideration the time spent for permitting, environmental issues, et cetera, if there's an existing piece of real estate that can work, you could be getting a year or two off the process into point of occupancy. So it's really the attraction for repurposing these available spaces.
So obviously with those requirements and the feasibility study, not every property is ready. What's the inventory kind of like in the market? Is it hard to find buildings that are ready to be converted?
I think from the phone calls that we're getting, and I'm sure everyone else is, it seems like there's a lot of stock out there of buildings that have just been either sitting empty or they're waiting to get rid of existing tenants. Not to sound crude, but they're waiting to end leases or terminate leases so they can bring in new tenants with higher rates, higher rents. And I think that's the attractive component to this.
Interesting. And I'm sure you will see it continue to grow outside of Cambridge and throughout Massachusetts. Yeah. So
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think the other unique thing is it's not just office buildings anymore. I mean, as Raffe and Jim can probably attest to, it's anything from a Lowe's to an old hotel that was the hotel business out, as well as the office business is probably not as booming. So it could be anything from a Lowe's, a Home Depot, office, movie theaters, anything that has an existing structure, I think is probably up for debate. Even a hockey rink. I mean, anybody is really kind of trying to keep it as close as they can to Boston. So anything that is really vacant is probably up for grabs or up for consideration. Now, how you get there to the end, I think, is those hard business decisions and hard utility questions that need to be had. But I mean, yeah, Raffe, Jim, you could chime in on, kind of buildings that you've been asked to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I would even toss in retail strip malls, right? Anything is a possibility if it has the right infrastructure. And as you said, Nick, it's based on location as well, right? And if it can be converted. So it's any problem. I believe owners and landlords are really looking at that for the feasibility of their projects, and with the income of rent and leases. How can they maximize their opportunities? An old vacant or partially vacant retail strip mall versus the opportunity to have a life science company come in.
Mhm.
Interesting. And Nick, you had mentioned hockey rinks. My son happens to play hockey. He plays for the Minutemen Flames out of Marlborough. The facility there has 8 hockey rinks. I believe it's the biggest in the country. But you got me thinking, and especially with the vaccination now, some of it needs to be, cold storage, have cold storage. Do you think there'll be a significant growth in cold storage warehousing with the new vaccine and this type of warehousing need going forward?
So I think uniquely, we sit as a region in kind of like a bio cluster, right? A big biotech cluster that covers Massachusetts, parts of New Hampshire, Rhode Island. I think you're going to see micro clusters of pharma cold storage around areas that have the option of 2 avenues for an airport. So, for example, you could use Marlborough. You have the Worcester Airport, you have Logan, and you have TF Green. So if something were to happen where you can't get to Logan, you could get to TF Green in Worcester. I think you're going to start to see areas like those pop up, especially outside of the vaccine in some of these smaller companies that are arriving in the suburbs, where their item needs to be very close to a shipping hub to get it to where it needs to be. I think, yes, the vaccine is really magnifying the need, but I think overall, you're going to start to see those pop up, probably Chelsea, Everett, Worcester, definitely in Rhode Island where you have those options. I definitely can see those coming up in 2021, probably on a quicker time frame than we thought.
Interesting. Raffe or Jim, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that, cold chain management is obviously it's been in play for a while outside of Massachusetts, mainly, in foreign countries where these drugs have been produced and manufactured. Now that Massachusetts is bringing that back or looking to entice companies to bring manufacturing back to Massachusetts, we are seeing an uptick in the need and the requirement for that type of building where you develop a drug in a cold state and it has to remain in a cold state until it's finally delivered and injected. So having those facilities, having those warehouses that can really take on that type of infrastructure is a little bit more unique, and now Massachusetts is seeing that.
Yep. Interesting. I believe you mentioned Marlborough. I believe somebody from the Marlborough Economic Development is here on the call. With growing trends, I know the manufacturing side of life science is trending. Do you see any other trends going forward in life science?
The trend that we're seeing is obviously deliverables. How soon can the project be delivered? There's a lot of emphasis on project schedules, and there appears to be a shift with really partnering with the firms to help between the budgeting, schedule, and risk mitigation, whether it be design build, design assist. It's really about the process of getting the projects built and online for that customer as soon as possible for the product that they have or the research that they're looking to take on.
I think to Jim's point earlier and to the point he just made, I think, using the existing buildings and repositioning them to some sort of way, shape, or form is probably the biggest trend that we're going to see. Using the Mass Pike as kind of a life, the life of a biotech company. They start an R&D in Cambridge or in the inner city, and then kind of work their way out towards Worcester as they grow and become more commercialized and have a manufacturing requirement. I think because of the demand of square footage that exists in Massachusetts, I think we're in a deficit of 4 million square feet for life sciences. That speed to market, along those lines are probably the biggest trend that we're going to see is how can we collaborate as an industry to deliver these in the middle of COVID times where not materials are, so readily available to gather. I think that's the biggest trend that we're going to see. We as an industry in the life science construction design industry is, we've seen the life cycle of these companies. It's now supporting them adequately in the right way as they grow and develop. And I think that's going to be, you're going to see a lot more of them based on what we're seeing real time in the vaccine.
Yeah, I'd also add that I think what we're going to be dealing with moving forward is the modularity of design and getting more unitized components, which can be built offsite and shipped and basically plug and play. We do a lot of stick-built design or custom design, which is all well and good. Modular clean rooms have always been prevalent in our industry. I think we're going to see more and more of the modularity be inserted into design just from a speed to market standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that plays a hand into the prefab world and environment these days, right? And it's all about speed to market. It's about being faster, more efficient, and delivering a higher quality product. That's one of the shifts that my company made about 5 years ago, recognizing where the industry was headed. And being a leader in, lean construction means and methods, we've been able to encompass that into delivering the project for our particular clients.
And where would a lot of the prefab and modular process be taking place? Would it be outside of Massachusetts, inside of Mass?
I think
Raffe. I was going to say, there are plants nationwide where these happen. We see them down in the Carolinas and Texas, Pennsylvania, where we have vendors and suppliers who can not only produce this in an efficient manner in a controlled environment, but also deliver it in a timely fashion. Now that commercial products are moving a little bit quicker and people are back to work, we're seeing that move faster these days.
I would encourage you all to try to keep an eye on the chat too. I'm trying to look at it. I see that there's also someone from the town of Tingsboro in the Economic Development Office. So that's 2 towns already just from, briefly checking into the chat. So obviously a real hot topic here and opportunities. And thank you to the economic development folks who are here. So next question, has the pandemic or how has the pandemic had an effect on the growth of life science in the Northeast?
Well, certainly there's been an uptick in the medical device manufacturing. where companies can pivot their existing operations, or companies who were producing already medical device are looking to increase their production power from creating medical device, the masks or swabs or face shields or whatever it may be. That was a very quick shift in the industry that we saw almost immediately. And now that almost a year has passed, we're getting close on the March date when the pandemic started. You're seeing companies having had 6-8 months time to plan their next steps and to look at real estate and to start, putting some real thought into expanding their operations, knowing that this is not going to go away, that we're only going to be seeing further mutations of these viruses and the increased need for these medical device products. That's completely separate from the drug development side, but from a standard medical device side, that's going to be the big one.
Yeah, I absolutely support what Raffe just commented. When the pandemic started, we absolutely saw an uptick in medical device companies, whether it be companies that produced testing kits or calibration equipment for the actual test results, or even into companies who are in the R&D and the lab side related to it. Certainly an uptick in activity because of COVID-related issues that we're all experiencing. And that has not seemed to slow down at all. It's, if anything, it's continuing to grow.
It's increasing, yeah.
Yes.
I think with the the medical device, we saw like an immediate uptick, and it has stayed there. I think with in the networking event, I think someone mentioned, or right at the beginning of this, someone mentioned what Moderna and Pfizer are doing here in this state, and I think that's only going to push more companies to be in that space, whereas historically, vaccines in this state haven't been too common. In the early 90s, early 2000s, it was all rare disease, orphan drugs. I think with this being pushed forward based on world current events, I think you're going to see more vaccine-based companies become more common here, along with the rare disease and orphan drugs still kind of in the small companies and as they grow. I think, based on what we've seen, I think we're going to see more of those types of companies growing out of incubators that may live in Massachusetts.
Agreed.
Great. I also want to mention Brockton. Somebody from Brockton is on here too. So sounds like there's development opportunities all over the place. So let's see, next question. Since the pandemic, what changes have been going on into designing of space? And have you seen new products that can be used in facilities to fight the germs?
Almost immediately, I know we all have topics and we can talk about this. I'll just begin by saying almost immediately, even with projects that we had in design, clients came to us and asked us to just put a quick pause in what we can do to not only create socially distanced or professionally distanced seating arrangements within our designs, but what can they do from EH&S safety standpoint? Is it changing air filters from MERV 8 to MERV 13? How does that affect the static pressure of the air handlers? Can it even happen? What sort of PPE would they need? I mean, they're looking for us for advice, where we do have some expertise in working with laboratory clients and pharmaceutical clients who have these policies and procedures already put in place, from wipe down methods and standard operating procedures to certain devices that they would include in their design, for sticky mats going into clean rooms, or special antimicrobial pads for high touch point surfaces. These are all things that you're starting to see now being incorporated into facilities from a facility management side, but where have always existed in other facilities that were quote unquote cleaner facilities. So we're now adopting those ideals and that ideology into our design. What's tricky is getting to a point where you've pre-COVID designed a space to maximize seating, to then doing a complete 180 pivot and then having to completely separate the seating. Getting clients to understand that there is going to be a vaccine at some point and then life will return to normal wasn't really an option. People wanted to explore and have us design a space that you can sit far apart and you can work remotely, and they're going to have 50% capacity within their facility. So that was a very real thing. I know Jim and Nick, you saw the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think going forward too, we're also going to see the makeup of the space change as far as the ratios of true lab space to office space, with people now having the ability, a proven ability to work remotely. We'll see more of that company's real estate shift towards the laboratory side versus the office side. And as Raffe said, even the space within the office side is going to change. The positioning of cubes, maybe higher partitions to offer a degree of separation. On the Brent, as you mentioned in your question, what have we seen for design that would work towards the germ side? On the electrical side of the industry, there is some new product that is out there through lighting, which uses the visible light spectrum to actually kill germs. Not specifically COVID directly, but germs in general, which is really important as you look at these life science companies and the move towards well design, which is really a much different space based on the employees. It's all part of it. And I think going forward, we'll see more of that product, which is offered from Legrand and their technology being introduced in spaces, laboratory spaces, even office spaces. Obviously, anything where it's common shared space is a perfect opportunity and solution for those particular products. But we will definitely begin to see that sort of technology come into all of the facilities that are now being built. It's a no-brainer. It's really makes all the sense in the world. And I think this COVID pandemic just heightened the awareness of the spaces that we're in. I mean, it would be really great if we could cut down on, the transmission of colds and flus and whatnot by being in our offices. So there's definitely technology that's coming out that's going to support this.
I think the one unique piece that I'm seeing and have experienced, at least in trying to curb the initial concern of being in an office or being in a lab space is, Raffe had mentioned changing out filters and using types of, I think it was MERV 8 to a MERV 13, and what does that do to your mechanical systems? I think, we've seen, clients come back and say, hey, we want to change our office space from, 5 air changes an hour, 2 air changes an hour to 5, and kind of freshen up the air for the users that are going to be in there. I mean, typically there aren't any grave requirements for office space, but as you get in towards a lab and a clean room, there are, requirements based on the room and the type of room that you're in. Some folks, larger companies are using that type of model just to keep the air, more fresh than what we've seen in the past. Although it spends a little bit more money in terms of your electric bill or your power bill, but it's less expensive than a capital expenditure for a new fan, air handler, exhaust fan, and it can be done.
There's usually that initial study to even see if your units can even handle that type of infrastructure.
Yeah. So I mean, those are some quick, easier ones, at least to possibly get past some of the concern. At least definitely in higher concentration office areas.
Great, thank you. Next question: where do you see the majority of growth for life science in the year 1, 3, 5 years ahead? And also, do you think life science will have the industry will be moving out to the further reaches of Mass and beyond for development?
I mean, land is expensive. Within the 495 belt, it starts to get a little bit more cost effective as you go west, north, some areas to the south. We're seeing that 495 belt development happen. That's where the developers are really setting their sights, mainly because there's more space for not only greenfield development, but there's also more opportunities for existing buildings that could have conversion capabilities and potentials. We certainly see the hot spots, Marlborough, Mansfield, Bedford, Billerica. They're even going into Worcester. We have some studies that we're doing right now for taking old semiconductor buildings that were built for manufacturing purposes and looking at that as a potential for a laboratory conversion. So there are many buildings around, and we're just seeing that push west and north.
I think to answer the question, I think it's already really gone west. It's gone to Worcester. I know Matt Zaccaro's here from Galaxy, who's very involved in the Worcester site. So I'd like to say that the Worcester in points northwest, Bedford, Billerica area, or Burlington are kind of well populated already. I want to say probably that 24 belt, probably the Norwood, Norton, Stoughton area is probably going to be really what's left as some of the areas are becoming more populated. These buildings require a lot of space in a large footprint. So uniquely, more land the better, and tenants have gotten really, how do I say this, real estate savvy to their degree and have the folks to support them. So as they grow and develop, usually when they get somewhere in a manufacturing world, they don't want to move. So having those options of more space is probably the better. That's strictly on a manufacturing end. That's probably going to be out in the suburbs. In the city, I think it's really going to be very similar to what we see Kendall, Alewife area now, even into Lexington, is very populated.
I think also what it comes down to is the access to the workforce too, right? Where's the workforce coming to that's going to be able to, support the companies? As Nick just mentioned, obviously, the Route 3 technology corridor, Billerica, Bedford, Burlington, Lexington, Waltham areas, we've seen an enormous amount of activity. Watertown, even out into Fort Devens, Framingham, Marlborough area was where most of the activity. So there seems to be that movement out from Cambridge, where real estate is really difficult, very expensive, and getting out into that 495 belt for easier commute for the workforce, and where the workforce is available to support the firms.
Yeah, and landlords and developers are becoming savvier and have already been practicing the transfer of shuttle buses and getting people from the more populated areas out to their spaces in the Waltham and Watertown area, creating unique transportation solutions for these companies' workforce, just to keep that talent from the Boston and Cambridge area. And making it as easy as possible and the best place to work. So there's definitely some alternate solutions to going west and north.
Brent, before we jump off here, there was a question that was asked about existing Massachusetts, capital assets. So I know the Worcester site was an old, Raffe, Jim, you might correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was an old Worcester hospital site that's being used. I think that's probably the first one. of its kind that's being looked at, but I wouldn't be shocked if other sites in the future are probably being looked at as they're decommissioned. I did see that as I tried to rifle off a few answers, but it was kind of timely in how timely in the question being asked. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, we're going to take some of the audience. We'll go to the audience for some questions. There's some that have lined up already in a moment. I know everyone has obviously talked about the pandemic, and the pandemic has certainly changed, you know, commercial real estate and how people think about it with remote, you know, a remote workforce. Many companies were able to remain, you know, efficient and operational, even with people working from home. It may be even more efficient from a cost perspective, and it's really changing real estate along with this, you know, life science development. So very interesting, exciting times. But on the topic of the pandemic, how how have each of you and your companies dealt with the pandemic on, you know, company-wide and on your projects?
Well, on the projects, it certainly has been a challenge, and that's been the biggest focus. One is the workforce, to make sure that they have an environment that is as safe as absolutely possible, and that comes down to, you know, developing good processes, good protocols, bringing in the right sanitation, and also reducing the workforce on site. It also ties into lean and prefab, where we're able to manufacture and still keep that project as productive as possible, but actually manufacturing off site. So let's say that particular project that may have had 20 people traditionally to build it can now be built with 8 people and still be productive and deliver on time. You know, I think the biggest thing through the pandemic is it brought a whole level of anxiety to all of us and all of our teams and, you know, all of our employees throughout the companies. Uncharted territories. No one really knew what was going to come from it. We tried to look at the situation in the most positive light that we could, and said, you know, this is an opportunity as a company to really look at our bucket list. And what I mean by the bucket list, there's always things that you say, geez, if I had the time, this is what we would do. And that's what we did within our company. We have a phenomenal team. We're really blessed and really excited about the team that we have, that gives so much each and every day to make sure that our projects get delivered on time and of the best quality. And our company looked at it, it's like, this is a time where our company needs to be there to support our people. So we didn't furlough anyone. Instead, what we did is we turned towards our bucket list and said, okay, what can we do to improve ourselves now? Our focus was on training. All of our people right now are all OSHA 30 trained, for example. We spent hours in training programs on electric vehicle charging systems, thinking that that's really going to be part of our futures going forward. And we spent a fair amount of time in training our team on a communication and scheduling platform that we use called Manufacton, which is really the essence of our lean prefab initiative. So we really changed the focus on that until such time as projects were back up and running, the right protocols were put in place on job sites, and there was an understanding of how to work and be productive in this environment. But it required everybody's involvement. It still does today, to make sure that the sites are as safe as possible for all the trades that are out there.
Yeah, I would echo what you're saying, Jim. From our standpoint, we've certainly seen a shift in how we do business, somewhat from a technology standpoint, because we've always been set up to work remotely. We've had the infrastructure in place. It is now more robust of a backbone for our company. But initially, it was, you know, there was a lot of unknown, and us just setting up the proper SOPs and following CDC guidelines for safe working environments for an office We went so far as to actually lease additional space within our building just so we can get more square footage to spread people out. That was a necessity just because of the occupancy limitations that the city of Boston has placed on companies. So these are some of the things that we've done, and I'm sure a lot of other companies have done the same, where we're giving our employees a safe working environment.
So I think uniquely, because as a construction management firm, you are home to, tradespeople that come to your site every day. So, and you're also, going to and from an office. So I think I'll start with the field first and kind of work my way back towards the office. So I think uniquely, being on site should be a safe place, and COVID or not, that's always the intent, is to minimize the amount of risk and safety concerns that you have. I think with COVID on top of it, we've all kind of taken a step back and actually not gone as fast as we've always gone, and taking the necessary, steps to get in and out of site safely, deliver the materials safely. Whereas before it was very, how fast can we go? How many people can we throw on this job? How many people can we fit in a room? I think those days are at least paused for now with the pandemic, and using this time to, Jim pointed out earlier, prefabbing things, having the body count be a lot less on site, and having it controlled in a space off site where it's not as congested. You have the right air changes. So I think on a site, I think that's probably been more prevalent. I know in the life science community, prefab is one of the lifebloods of making a job go as fast as they have. So it's even more so. I've heard some subs having, excuse me, a combination where, Interstate and the mechanical contractor will get together and start building more modular-like setups, so they can have it done and have, less firefighters on site, less tradespeople on site, less deliveries, et cetera. So I think on the field side, we as CMs have to support that, making sure that everybody who gets to site and gets in on site are safely on site, outside of safety risks, but also, in a time of COVID. Now, in our office, we spent time, doing training. We've spent time spreading people out and kind of rejiggering the office, whereas before it was on our bucket list. Getting that training done, anticipating some of these things would break loose when March and April were happening. So I think those things are being done, and still will continue to be done as part of, continuous personal development. So I know it's kind of a two-pronged answer, but I think it's important to kind of point out the field is just as important as the offices that we sit in.
Yeah, thank you, all of you, for your input. I mean, you've talked about all kinds of different commercial real estate properties. There's a question that has come in specific to healthcare facilities. You may have answered this, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit more. With the pressure the pandemic has placed on healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes across the country, do you anticipate that this market will need to update how their facilities are designed and operate in the future? Great question.
For sure. Certainly hospitals and medical office buildings have been taxed with the influx of patients coming in. I think, those are larger institutional buildings that will eventually see a reconfiguration or modifications to their facilities as the years come. But they've also done strategic rework of their procedures so they can allow for the influx of these patients by setting up remote facilities, additional care facilities outside of the hospital. So I think in the short term, they've been making it work, but I think the long term will need to have some sort of reconfigurations.
I concur with that. I don't think I could have framed that more any better than you just did, Raffe, at least on my end.
Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to send them in. I do have a final question here for the panelists. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities for the year ahead for life science development? Biggest challenges and opportunities.
Raph, I can jump at this first if you want. I think the outside of the true real estate and finding the right building that works for tenants, that works for developers, I think the big elephant in the room that we've kind of all talked about is supply chain for materials to build these spaces. I mean, we can have a great design and a great project schedule and a great material order, but getting these materials from certain parts of the country and the world are probably the biggest challenge that we're going to see, at least on our end, on how we execute these projects and how, you know, some tenants, some developers, some landlords want to be in by, you know, this time next year operating, making sure that we get things that are locally or regionally sourced in case there is a shutdown. There could be very well a shutdown in other parts of the world that we have no control over and we can't finish this project. So I think that's the first challenge, and I see Jim nodding his head, so I'll let him chime in a second. I think the opportunity is really for life science companies. You know, Moderna and Pfizer have used new technology to get a vaccine done in less than a year. And it's being used now. I think the opportunity is seeing more of those types of end users coming to our space and really, you know, becoming more, you know, becoming larger in our market space, I think is probably the opportunity, as it's, you know, it's been vetted as an approved drug use. I think you're going to start to see more of those technologies coming into the commercial world. So those would be mine. I know Jim had the.
Well, yeah, Nick, absolutely. You touched on the supply chain, and that's absolutely a factor, as this past year has proven in so many ways. You know, especially anything that deals with electronics coming from overseas has been impacted. And electronics and so many of the components that are being installed in these facilities these days. So what it really boils down to, as I started to mention earlier, it's the going back to project scheduling in the partnering with firms, because it is imperative that we look at early release on long lead time items in order for a project to be successful. The ability to source, the ability to have an open mind, and products may need to be changed because it's just not going to meet the project schedule. So supply chain is definitely an important part. Also, the other issue that, as far as challenges that we have, is from the utility side. Speaking specifically on the power side, in what's going on right now, the utilities were, pre-COVID, were slammed with the robust environment that we've been enjoying here in New England with the amount of projects. Add COVID to this, and add the rush of the life sciences, and the focus of getting to market early. We're beginning to see project schedule slide, as far as the ability to get new services. And it's a broad spectrum. Whether it's an out of the ground facility, we could be looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 months before we can get a new service, or sooner if it's just an updated service in an existing building. So all of those play a really important factor in the deliverable as far as the challenges. But if we can partner early and get information out there, we can curtail some of the delays. As far as opportunities, we're just seeing so much activity focus on the life science side of things. I think here in New England, because of the academic institutions that we have, it really supports this industry. and we're really fortunate. But there's all sorts of opportunities that are still out there and planned for the future. So it's definitely going to be a very viable market for us here in the New England area.
I'll take that answer in a little bit of a different direction. Some of the challenges that we're going to see in 2021 is more resource based. Every sector has their experts, from healthcare to sports and rec to life science. Specifically, the S&T sector, where we have industry professionals who specialize in these types of facilities. The resources are tapped. There are people that, there are firms that are doing all this work, and that's what they specialize in. And finding the right professional to join your team and to be part of the process is dwindling, truthfully. So we're looking for opportunities to train our new up and coming staff and bring on new professionals. So we're always looking to hire the best and the brightest in the industry, but it's a good challenge to have coming up in the next year, but I do foresee it as a challenge, is bringing on experts in the industry who can handle the workload.
Great, thank you. And just so everyone's aware, I shared in the chat my contact information. This has been a great forum. The New England Real Estate Journal has been amazing for networking and content. Life sciences is one topic that New England Real Estate Journal handles. There are a lot of other life science networking groups out there, including Mass Bio, as I mentioned, New England Health Executives Network, Mass Medic, Bio Exchange. There's a life science forum. Boston Business Journal does life science networking events as well. So if you're interested in some of that stuff, feel free to reach out to me. But I really want to thank the panel again, and especially thank Rick Kaplan and the New England Real Estate Journal for all that they do. These events are phenomenal, great content, great networking, and I encourage all of you to visit their social media and like it, engage it, follow it. They're on Facebook and LinkedIn, especially, right, Rick? Those are your two that you really want to, and YouTube too. They do great video content. So I'd say those are the three social media channels you should engage with New England Real Estate Journal.
Well, thank you, Brent. Thank you for that commercial. We appreciate it. And I thank you for reminding me that, yes, this is recorded. So anyone that has missed it today will be able to watch it over and over again. Get your family and relatives around the living room and put this on the TV. It's great viewing for a family.
Grab the popcorn.
Yeah, I think they'll really enjoy it. I want to thank the panel, and I want to thank Brent. Always great to have you as a moderator. I want to thank Nick and Jim and Raffe for participating in this. Great information. I want to also thank all of the people for attending. And Jim, you mentioned the inauguration. I almost forgot. Who won the presidency? I haven't been following it. It's been going back and forth so much. I lost track.
Good thing we're ending on that note.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to thank everyone for attending today. And if you're interested in either speaking or sponsoring of our Rhode Island event, which is February 10th, you can contact me. I put my contact information in the chat box as well. Although I am Rick Kaplan from the New England Real Estate Journal. You can just go to the NEREJ.com and you can get my information from there as well. I want to thank our sponsors for today, Licata Risk Advisors, CI Design, Structure Tone, and Interstate Electrical Service. I want to thank them for being our sponsors for this afternoon or this morning. And I want to thank everyone again for attending. And again, thank you all for speaking today. And I want to wish everyone a happy and safe rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.